You think, well, people have good intentions, that you especially think that if you're naive and agreeable. So all of you who are sitting there out there thinking people have good intentions, you're probably high in agreeableness. But that's not always the case. People can have very dark motivations that are fully conscious and very well elaborated. And you can't just be thinking about people who have good intentions but have somehow gone wrong. If you ever meet someone who isn't like that and you think that, you're just a tree with ripe fruit to be plucked. So you don't want to be in that situation. You have to keep your eyes open. I've seen people who are in families where probably nothing they were ever told was true. Like it was never just true. It was always twisted and bent in some way by whoever was talking to them for the purposes of that person. Power or domination or positive illusion or delusion or something. Like all the communication within the family was motivated. And so it's so awful to grow up in an environment like that because you can't get a grip on what's real. And then, it can get worse than that in that the person will tell you that they love you and they'll act all sweet, but every time you do anything that's even vaguely productive and useful, they'll just criticize you to death. And all the while telling you that they love you. It's really horrible. And that's all tangled up with deception and lies. And it's a weird thing because if you look at the Freudian hypotheses, you'll notice that Freud attributed an awful lot of psychopathology to repression, right? But I think the distinction between repression and self-deception or deceit is very permeable. It's like, what's the difference between repressing something and lying to yourself about it? Well, Freud would say often that repression occurs unconsciously, but I really wonder about that. I think that what happens is that something happened or you did something that you don't like and it's bothering you and you could think it through, but you just decide not to. You just don't think it through. So it's left vague and uncertain and, it's fairly emotionally salient, but you just refuse to think it through. And you practice doing that until you've built up a habit of not thinking that through, and then you forget that you've built up the habit, and then it's like it's being repressed unconsciously. But I think that or at least you knew when you first did it. And so, when you meet people who are acting in a twisted and peculiar way, and you ask yourself, they're very manipulative, say, you ask yourself, well, do they know what they're doing? The answer to that could be, well, no. But another answer could be, yeah, but they knew once. They knew when they made the decision to start acting like that, but after they did it 100 times or so, and made it into an automatic routine, well, then they forgot its origin, and now it runs autonomously. And so now they don't know, but they did know. And so, this is the sort of point, and this is the real point of the existentialists, where clinical psychology and the claims of morality start to become very tightly aligned. And it's something that the psychiatric and psychological industries, so to speak, don't really tackle head on. My experience has been that in these situations, for example, where the person has 5 terrible things going on in their life, that there's just deception twisted in and strewn in all of that. People are betraying each other, and there's no fidelity in the relationships, there's no clear and genuine communication, everything's manipulation, no one admits to what they're really up to. There's a lot of false and saccharine love, which has absolutely nothing to do with love. It's all for appearance, and you cannot be healthy in a situation like that. I don't think, in my experience, apart from terrible luck, because, you can get cancer, diabetes, or any number of awful things. In my experience, apart from the tragedies of life, there is nothing that hurts people more than deception. Lies do people in. Because, it's one thing to be hurt. Maybe you break your leg. That's one thing. It's another thing to be attacked by 2 or 3 people who break your leg and do everything they can to demean you at the same time. It's like lots of people break their leg and they're not traumatized. It's very few people who can go through the latter experience without being, seriously and permanently damaged. I talked to David Buss and Robert Trivers within the last month. Great evolutionary biologist, great evolutionary psychologist. Trivers told me he'd looked at a new paper on psychopaths. He's very interested in psychopaths because one of the problems human societies have is Well, how do you keep the really malevolent types under control? Now, women solve that problem in part by being unfortunately predisposed by their nature, we might say, to want men who are somewhat aggressive. Because you need someone around who's a little monstrous to keep the real monsters away. And so women have this tough choice to make with men because they need someone who's strong enough to be protective, let's say, in an intimidating manner when the circumstances warrant it, but also simultaneously productive, kind, and generous enough to share. And those two things are somewhat antithetical. And you see that that's variation in the personality dimension, agreeableness. But really disagreeable people, they're kind of self-centered, harsh, and blunt. But really agreeable people, they're complete bloody pushovers. And so agreeable people are nice and kind and empathetic and all of that. And those might be wonderful traits, particularly if you're taking care of defenseless infants. But they lay you open to predation by Machiavellian psychopaths. And so it's very hard for us to figure out how to thread the needle, say, so that we can be simultaneously kind enough to be kind to infants and, tough enough to regulate our societies. And you know what's really interesting too is because I've had a lot of clients who've had PTSD, and without exception, every single one of them was induced by one form of malevolence or another. They have to develop a very sophisticated philosophy of good and evil to get out of it, because they have a worldview in which those things don't really exist. There's no such thing as pure malevolence. Well, that's fine unless you encounter it. And then as soon as you encounter it, you won't know what to do. And then you won't be able to get on with your life. You'll do nothing but think about that and think about it and think about it and think about it. It'll disrupt your sleep. It'll put you into a permanent state of preparation for action. Because the part of your brain that's detected that, which in my estimation, by the way, is the same part, at least in part, that detects snakes. It's the same damn circuit. Once it's seen something like that, it is not going to let you go till you figure it out. And there's no going back. There's no saying, oh, the world is safe. It's not safe. Not at all. It's not safe. The fact that you think it's safe means that you were living in an unconscious bubble that was sort of provided to you by your culture. It's a gift. And now that's been shattered. And so now what do you do? Well, the answer is you retreat until you're in your house and there's nowhere you can go. You're the ultimate frozen rabbit, right? And your life is hell because you can't function. The alternative is, let's take apart the things you're afraid of. Let's expose you to them, carefully and programmatically. And then you'll learn that you're actually tougher than you think. You never knew that. And maybe you didn't want to take on the responsibility because, people play a role in their own demise, so to speak. When you had opportunity to go out and explore or withdraw because you were afraid, you chose to withdraw because you were afraid. So it's not only that you were overprotected often, it's that you were willing to take advantage of the fact that you were overprotected and run back there whenever you had the opportunity.